Hi everyone, Alon Lits here. I'm the CEO of October Health. Really excited to have Warren Myers with me today. He's the founder and CEO of a super exciting scale-up called Aura, and really excited to have him here with me. Welcome, Warren.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
It's a great journey with you so far. So we'll talk about how we got here.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. And before we get into, culture, high performance, etc., would love to just ensure the audience has context around Aura and your journey.
Yeah, so I always say we started Aura all the way back in 2017, mainly because even back then, because you guys were around with Uber, like you could get a taxi or a pizza quicker than you could get help when you're dying, and that didn't make sense, right? Similar to those other technical marketplaces, there was a ton of supply by way of idle security fleets and ambulances that were only servicing a tiny percentage of South Africans, and in a country that needs it so badly. We thought, like, how do we democratize access to these life-saving services in a way that creates a shared value concept, whereby us as a platform succeed, response fleets can commercialize their idle capacity more, and millions more people can now access and afford this really important service, which we said is almost like this should be more. This is a basic human need. It should be far more democratized. So we got started initially in SA, and we moved into East Africa shortly afterwards. Set up a small business in West Africa. And then from there, we've actually expanded the platform up into the UK. The slightly different business model there. We don't respond to people there. We respond to home and business alarms because the police won't anymore. And we've just this year kicked off that similar model in the US. But I think to sum it all up, like our vision while we created this company was to help create a world where everyone is safe. Like we believe in 10 years' time, there won't be a world where people are being raped and murdered at the level that they are now. It needs to become as if we're living in the Stone Age at the moment, and we think that effective change will happen. And platforms like us are going to get us there. So that's really the sum up. But how you get there has a lot to do with like a performance culture.
So obviously a mission-driven company with a really powerful mission about saving lives. And you do that both through armed response as well as, well, not always armed response in the case of the UK, but response from a security perspective, then medical responses as well. And it's really about creating that win-win where there is, as you say, this supply that's sitting there being idle that could actually be driving value for that response network, i.e. the cars on the road, either the security response or ambulance services, as well as for the individual who needs that help. And it's about connecting the two. So just to maybe bring home the value of the service, like what are some of the response times, right? And you don't need to go into specifics around stories. And I know there've been some, really life-saving stories, but, before Aura, how long someone would wait for response from a security or ambulance perspective and where you're at today?
Before Aura, the typical response from a security perspective would be responding to your home. And look, in some cases, that response time was quite good.
That's with a dedicated alarm.
Yeah, exactly. But unlocking the app and IoT side, where like anyone could take this wherever they went, that there's nothing to measure off there because it was never available, so it was a new sector.
What you'd call 1-800.
Yeah, you might as well phone Santa Claus. That's right. But where we're at now is at an 8-minute average response time in South Africa. That's faster than any police force in the world. And ambulance response times are slightly higher. They're at 12, and that's because they don't sit in the roads as much as private security do, and there's also not as many of them. But still, 12-minute response times is it's about an order of magnitude faster than the average that it was before. If you typically would have phoned to get an ambulance before, even from a private provider, the response times were over 20 minutes. No. And it really like takes a lot out of e-hailing platforms architectures, like making machine to machine. So when you when you need help, you're dropping a location into our platform, and it's just matching the closest responder location to get to you. There's no humans involved. There's a human that oversees it, but they're not involved in actually dispatching.
And if you think about that emergency situation, it's also like before Aura, I mean, you had to call a operator, right? And not easy when an individual's in crisis to explain where they're at, to get that point across. They're probably dealing with whatever is going on at the moment on the ground. So that that technology just introduces so much more accessibility and so much ease of use.
Yeah, that's a constant improvement metric in our business, accessibility, because apps are cool, but people don't always download apps, especially in Africa. And they often don't think to go to an app, fight or flight in an emergency. So we've introduced new ways that a subscribed user can access our service using voice prompts, phoning in. A lot of people, they're fight or flight. Like the biggest brand in the world, one of the biggest ones, 911. It's a brand, right? People's fight or flight is to dial a number in a huge part of the world. And we have to cater for that because, I always tell the story, like, I think it was even a year ago, like my wife thought she was being followed and she phoned me. Like that is just like a clear explanation, like why I'm the founder of Aura, use that. So, working with how people are programmed is an important part of how you craft a user experience, and relying only on apps is not best. So accessibility is something that is like bleeding edge for us. Like I'm quite clear where it will go. I think it will eventually get to an agent which actually understands you're in trouble, either from your wearable or from your voice or from a situation, and you don't need to push anything and get to anything and open anything or dial anything. Like that's what our API is ready for. That's what it's designed for. Is like we've built this whole back-end platform to literally accept like a panic that's coming through from someone who needs help. I think the voice and biometrics is the next big frontier. Like your heart, these biometric guys know what your heart rate does in a trauma event. They don't. The false rates on that are tiny. Your heart has a specific signature when it has a trauma event. So like using those as triggers is like where we ultimately run. I think the app will actually fall away over time.
That's super interesting. I think also big lesson there for business around, like you may think like an app is this big, innovation in the space, but actually just, leveraging old school technology like a call, but advancing that with geolocation as well, right, is super powerful.
Yeah. No, the only guys with successful MAU ratios are content driving. If you want to absorb content out the internet, whether it's entertainment or news or a game, those are apps that have the right, but for other services that don't live in that content world, like you need rather use WhatsApp, rather use something that people understand or know to connect to a service. People having thousands of tiles on their phone is going to move, already is moving it away. And ultimately, like the operating system effectively is going to be far more vocal, agent driven, and you're not going to really engage with the internet with your fingertips as much as we do now. You're really going to be prompting vocal prompts in, and then if you need to, you'll take your phone out to get content back. But a lot of the time, your phone is still in your pocket or in your hand, and and tasks and prompts will be done by the operating system for you. So yeah, apps are, like I said, they're really good for content flow back from the internet, but not for anything else. I don't know.
Super interesting, and just that critical piece of continuously innovating and in some ways disrupting yourself, right? I'm sure it was a difficult decision. You've invested in an app, but we need to innovate and actually meet the market where it's at versus try and force the market to our solution. I know we could chat about the business model for the whole discussion, but we're here to talk about culture in addition to Aura. You started nearly 8 years ago. It's been a long journey. It's not an easy journey, but part of what I think has made Aura successful is the team that you've built around you. So, maybe starting off, how do you drive that high performance culture? Because as a startup, it's difficult, right? There are easier things a lot of people could be doing. You're kind of creating a brand where it didn't exist before. You're creating awareness. You're, innovating on the product. There's a lot that you're dealing with. So you need the right people to get that right. So how do you get that culture right?
And that's also a long discussion, but I think that to kick it off, I was always quite clear that we wanted to really overhire initially, specifically in leadership roles. A lot of people, I think, do that afterwards, but the prerequisite for scaling is good people, specifically good leadership, strategic thinkers. And generally in the early stages, it's a cost issue because really good people are cost a lot. I always, like, any money we had, I'd rather put it prerequisitely into like a good team, specifically a team that complemented me well, because I'm fairly like focused on growth and that, but like I'm not like on the finance side and the tech side. Like we needed strong people in those roles to drive that, and just so like everyone can kind of move together and like own their own space and trust each other, because everyone's like a high level individual like that's delivering. And what we've always, I think, got right from the get-go is the vision piece, and how that reverse engineers into clear line KPIs, and then autonomy on how to go and achieve those KPIs. In our world, we always had this vision of to create the world where everyone is safe. And initially it was like this cool thing, and like, it was, we put it on the wall and that, but what we actually where it evolved into, I actually quantified it. I actually have we had a 5-year plan. It's called our Big Hairy Audacious Goal Plan, and that reverse engineered like what does that world look like quantitatively by way of life saved and revenue and users. And then I worked that backwards per year, and then even per cycle, the 6-month cycle. To clearly, there's 3 metrics in our business. There's user growth, there's response times, and then there's safe spaces created. And everything from that is a base initiative that guys need to go and do to just achieve and move through 3 metrics. I think if people have more than 3 metrics, it's especially in a small org, like a growing org, I think that causes a lot of complications. Like even high level people should be focusing on 2. Even 1 is great, right? Because a lot of the time you get pulled into a lot of different directions, and people are wearing a lot of hats in a business, and that's natural, and especially in the earlier stage. But the more you can focus them and dovetail KPIs into this longer term plan, you get there quicker, and you land up having people that can feel their contribution to that end game. Everyone's kind of like moving in the right direction and towards the same north metric, which is that vision, and it's clearly broken down like how do we get there.
Yeah, so I think that's super powerful, and I think something that we see across high-performing businesses is this concept of alignment, right? So no matter what position you're sitting in, as you're saying, people know how they contribute to that overall goal of the company. So how do you cascade that down? How do you get that right within the organization?
So I think that there's a few things, but I think the two main ones is properly instilling core values, because I think a lot of companies create core values and they explain them to you in the induction, and they may be up on the wall, and we have integrity, but what we actually do is we train with our team. We train them on like how do you actually implement daily like what these core values are. And when you have an org that's got offices in 3 different countries, different cultures, ages, etc., like your core values are the things that make everyone the same. They make you part of Aura, right? And we've got 6 of these, and we spend time every week with our team actually explaining what I'll give you. One of them is a Pathfinder, right? So we're writing the playbook on this business. There's no one really that's done what we have before, and if we don't understand that first to market could be a disadvantage, if you don't carry on moving through that forest, you've just created a path behind you. You can be the friendster. So a good example of like how we would speak to how you implement pathfinding, would be like making sure people have perspective on like how do you deal with anyone that you need to affect a goal, whether it's a supplier, a customer, or a coworker. Instead of having your own ego on how you perceive the world, you have to have perspective on what they need. it's a selling technique. Like, don't sell me a product, like find out what they need. But that applies into any engagement, whether you're trying to work with a outsourced development house, or you're trying to find a distribution partner. Like, people don't simply like put themselves in that that other ones, and that helps the whole scenario move forward, right? So core values, the reason why we take time implementing them and actually trying to get muscle memory onto them is the following. And I think this is really comes down to answering your question is core values are a way of explaining to a human being, here's your KPI, here's your tools, go and do it. And here's how you behave. Your actions are dictated by these 6 core values. You do it with integrity, you pathfind, collective strength, all of the core values. And it's the same way I always use an example for my team. Like, I've got a 7-year-old boy. I can either tell him your core values, you never hit a girl, right? So I can either follow him around all day at school and just check that he doesn't hit a girl, or you instill it in him very young so that he can go and have the autonomy to go and be like that without me being there all the time. Which, and in an organization's point of view, it creates massive autonomy and massive efficiency, because there's no layers trying to implement things. It creates really like people who know what they need to do, and they've got the tooling that they need to do in the playbook, and they've got these core values, which is like this is how we effect change.
Yeah, so the KPIs are the what, and the core values are the how. Yeah. Right? And both are equally as important, right? If you've got a top performer who's crashing the what, the KPIs, but not living the values, there's a disconnect, and they're not going to succeed in the organization. So, I mean, the other concept that you spoke to with, 2 or 3 KPIs per individuals is this concept of focus, right? Which is, critical for any business, but even more so within a startup. So how do you get that right? To your point, people, startups can be ambiguous, things are changing very quickly. How do you focus people on those KPIs and make it very clear to them, this is what you need to achieve?
You just have to get super, super strict around what you're looking to achieve, and then reverse engineer from there. And look, underneath a lot of those 3 goals, like I might have an ops metric, which is response times, right? Underneath that, there's 10 goals, like there's 10 initiatives. But a lot of the time people like see goals that they don't know how to like layer those things. It's like the ultimate goal.
Like the big rock.
Yeah, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal is this. Everything else needs to just contribute to that. And then what you find is, of the 20 things I wanted to do, okay, there's actually only 8 that really move the needle on that metric, right? And it has to come from the top, because otherwise people do naturally float, and kind of moth to the flame to certain things. And so I think it's just we just did recycle now. We started in March, and like I'm telling you, like 20 hours on like this is where we're going this year. These are the goals. This is mid ball. This is the high ball. And then there's underneath that, there's 3 goals. There's life saved, response times, revenue, and users, and everything else under then. All the initiatives drive directly into that. It's super clean and clear, and everybody knows what they're doing in order to achieve that.
Makes sense, and super simple when you lay it out, but I think something that most businesses actually don't get right, but impactful obviously when you do. So going back to your business, you've got people in different offices, there's diversity within that, you're not with everyone all the time. You spoke to this concept of autonomy, right? How do you get that right? How do you empower people to deliver on those KPIs that you set for them?
So the way that we handle people in Aura is, I think, quite unique. It's a simplified model that I implemented, which is, I think that people see HR and people as very technical. Like, for me, there's a relationship you're starting, and it needs to be a mutually beneficial, symbiotic relationship, really, like any other relationship in your world. And the relationship is between you and Aura. Right? That's what I say to people joining the company. Your manager is the facilitator of that relationship. It's not about you and your line manager. That's where a lot of ego and rubbish comes into play, right? Their job is to make sure you're growing with the company, right? And what does the company need? We've just said we need KPIs to hit our goal, right? So we need your innovation and that. But a lot of people are like, what does a person need? And we boiled it down to three things. It's market related or even better comp. And comp generally, in our view, works better when it's both cash and equity. Okay. Especially on the high level people. Don't be scared to talk about comp. It's the key thing in that relationship. It's like you're not being able to talk about money with your wife. It's unhealthy, right? Then the second thing is growth. Where and how can this person grow as a person? And typically, if they're in a growing company, that comes quite naturally. I think at huge orgs, it's kind of like growth trajectory is a ladder climbing exercise, as opposed to in our org, if someone's doing really well, there's almost like a natural growth progression for them. And the third thing that a human needs is impact. They have a couple spins around the sun, and they want to know that they're doing something important for the world. That also comes naturally for us and for your business. Luckily, we save 5 lives a day. Like, these people would have died if it wasn't. So that thing comes quite naturally for us. And I think if you have people that have the KPIs and they're getting that, the autonomy just comes. And autonomy is something that is not, we don't promote it. It's a requirement in our business. I hardly manage anyone in my business. I don't sit and have quarterly reviews with my reports. We have a relationship that if they're not happy about something, they'll come and talk to me about it early on, and we'll deal with it. But we don't sit and I always use this term circle jerk for every time we have I just rather let's get going. Come to me and talk to me. It's more fluid, right? So I think if you simplify, really down to the crux of this being a relationship, it needs to be symbiotic. And if someone's in that, you'll retain them forever. And retention is huge. I mean, in a business like ours, where, like I said, there's no playbook here and there's no competitors really we can, get staff from. Losing key people is a really retention is a really important metric. Luckily, we've never lost anyone we didn't really need, that didn't want.
That's amazing, that, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. If there's a few people, you create dependency on it, but it doesn't feel dependent because, again, it's a symbiotic thing. It's
everyone's winning.
Yeah.
So you spoke about this concept of accountability as well, right? Because ultimately there's, people have autonomy, but, you need to ensure accountability. So how do you get that balance right? Because as you're saying, you don't want, like you said something really interesting to me earlier, where you said you don't want to hire people who spend half their time managing other people, right? You want people focused on their KPIs, and obviously enabling their team through autonomy is part of that, but it shouldn't be taking up a huge amount of the time, because you've got the right people who are self-starters, they've got a high agency mindset, they can solve problems and they can deliver on their KPIs. But at the same time, if you have a high level of autonomy, there needs to be a level of accountability as well, right? Especially, as you grow the org, as you have, a mix of senior and junior people. So how do you ensure accountability?
I think the KPIs. I mean, it's really, we make the KPIs as binary and black and white as they are. That being said, in a world where someone doesn't smash their KPIs, we would really look at that and understand, is it a person problem, or are they dealing with external factors because they were pathfinding and doing something new? And but if that person does have that mindset and they're the right person, we'll work with them on it. We're not going to get rid of someone because they missed their KPI by 20%, Ross.
So sorry to interrupt, but I just think it's such a valuable point and such an interesting one, right? Your pathfinding, it's not easy, right? The KPI might be to launch a new market, and there are a number of variables that could impact on an individual's ability to launch a new market. So if ultimately the KPI is not met, but you can see the efforts, how do you assess that, right? Are you kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, well, they put in the effort, but there were factors beyond their control, and we're going to recognize that and enable them to kind of win in the future?
Yeah, you can always see if someone's an A player or not. I don't know how to really define it. There's time. The way that I define an A player, it's a story I have in my first business before Aura. We had a camera monitoring business, and in the very early stages, I was doing everything. We did the running around, and I was flying between Cape Town and I think Joburg, and I was on the late flight, and the next morning I had a make or break pitch with a big property REIT, and I needed to wear a suit back then. It was like quite proper still back in the day. And I messaged my nanny who was keen to my flat that back in Joburg, just check my suit. And get on the that was old BBM, get on the plane, get home, it's now 12, and the suit's in a dry cleaner packet, right? So the suit was dirty. She didn't ask me. She knew I'd pay her back, and I put on the suit and I closed the deal that morning. Like, that's what A players do. Some people are just coded to just deliver.
Taking that initiative,
and
right?
Think about it. If everyone asks their line manager what to do at every step, like, how much does that compound to me every day? It's not efficient, that, right? And I think what you need is you need to have people who know that, like, you have the space to try and go forward. And if you fail, you fail forward. And failing is actually forward movement. So going back to like missing KPIs, so did that person action stuff and fall forward? Because when you're pathfinding, you are going to hit trees and you're going to have these issues. But did we learn something from it as an org? Because we're writing the playbook here, and obviously failing is an important part of that journey. And B, did it not affect their morale, their energy? That's the other thing. Like, it's easy for a founder to not get demotivated by setbacks because it's just who you are, right? You're used to, but across the org, that can be quite difficult for a lot of people. So how they respond to that stuff is also important, because some people get super, they feel
they can't bounce back.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You've touched on a lot of concepts that we speak a lot about around, like, that high agency mindset. Your example around dry cleaning the suits, the perfect one.
What's good about that example is that this is not my CFO. This is like cleaning lady. So it goes like all the way through. It's just that
everyone in the org needs that.
They have this just general flow, like, it's that there's no, it's just full autonomy. How you explain that? It's someone who just gets shit done.
And I think it's an important one. And I've noted studies that have come out recently that have said that you can hire high IQ or high agency. High agency is going to outmaneuver high IQ any day of the week. So it's so powerful. And the other concept that you touched on is this concept of resilience, right? And I think it's probably the most critical skill that you need as a founder in a startup and in the world, right? If anything, the only thing that I always say, when I was at Uber and now at October, is that the only constant is change, right? And the world's only going to become more uncertain, right? With the innovation coming through AI, the way that, macro dynamics playing out in the world, the only constant is going to be change and ambiguity. And people need to be able to maneuver that. So I guess that's something that you hire for. Do you think that's something that you can teach? How do you get people to be comfortable in that discomfort?
You can't hire for it. So interviews are a very difficult thing to pick out whether someone's an A player. You actually only know, you can maybe reference their performance elsewhere, but you only really know if they're going to have that effect in your business once they're in. I think, really. I mean, there's a few things we try to do, and we think we've got an A player, and then we don't, But I think it's about trying to, in the early stage, like, just pick that out, like, really, like, dig into that early on, give them the challenges that they need to, like, is this person someone with that agency that they can do it on their own? And you can't hide it. So in the first 6 weeks, you'll know if someone's that person or not, right? And then you need to just have a good loop of either exiting them or repurposing them. But we often, like, hire fast if someone's not in the right role.
And I'm sure that that extends across the business, right? That sense of urgency, your speed to decisions. You need to make decisions, move on them, and move the business forward. You don't have time to wait and go through committees to make things happen.
Yeah. I think you've always said it as well. It was like, specifically with the slowest thing in a business like ours is always going to be product and engineering, right? So, and they can be like a difficult handbrake in the business, but we always say, like, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to work, at least from an MVP point of view. like just ship it and make sure, like if it's okay, and we'll iterate and we'll work from there. But across the org, the same thing applies. Like, I think if you have people who are scared to make their own decisions and they're scared of failing, that especially people at the coalface, like a lot of the key decisions in a business isn't at my level, it's actually at the coalface. And if they don't have the autonomy, and if they actually know that failure is celebrated here, and it is rewarded actually in some cases, right? Then they do that, because a lot of people are not wired like that. You know, they really, especially new people. So you have this new person in your business, they want to impress. Their mindset is to not make mistakes, right? And that's so bad, because they're actually the ones looking at the business through fresh lenses for the first time. They're the ones who can look at something in this, say, a system or a process, and say, oh, there's a better, cheaper way of doing this. But you suppress that, which is so crazy. So every single person that joins the organization still has like 20 minutes with me when they join. And that's all I tell them is look at every single thing and challenge it. It's your job to challenge this. Come up with 10 ways on every touch point where you touch the coalface. How can we get this better, cheaper, faster? Look, in a lot of cases, they don't have the context, and a lot of it just isn't relevant. But there are gems there, huh? Absolute gems.
Fresh perspective.
Because I'm not at the coalface, and even the C-suite aren't. And if you don't have people with that mindset at the coalface, you're the instrument in the front that's trying to pathfind is blunt, and pathfinding needs to be sharp at the front, right?
Yeah, so I love that. And I think you speak this concept of nothing's off limits, right? There's no holy grail. Everything that we do can potentially be better. So we should constantly be questioning what we're doing to see if there is a more innovative way to approach it. But I think we're on time, and really appreciate it. We could have chatted for a lot longer. I think, huge gems there, everything from alignment to autonomy to driving accountability to creating the right culture that defines success in a business, really changing the world. So thanks so much for joining us.
We could go on for long, but I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.